So I don't normally do this. I don't normally avoid making a video. I'm usually very excited to put out content for you guys, but I have definitely been putting off making this one. And that is just because I know that I'm about to go down a rabbit hole. I have no idea where it's going to lead, and this is a very complex, complicated subject. However, I feel very strongly that this is something that needs to be talked about. It's something that people should be aware of, and I want to try to do that on this channel. I anticipate this being a little bit of a video series because there is absolutely no way I can cover everything there is to talk about in a single video. So if this is something that interests you, make sure you subscribe so that you'll be in the know when those new videos come out. I was raised in a very traditional Catholic household. That's something that I've mentioned in the past. And so growing up, I was aware of organizations and clubs and fraternities and things that you can be members of as a Catholic. And so I had heard the name Opus Dei before, but I really didn't know anything about it. My family was never involved in it. It was just a name that I heard thrown around every once in a while. And so over the years, it just kind of faded away and was rolling around in the back of my head until about a month ago, I started to see it being brought up in some of these subreddit communities that I follow. And I was kind of just struck by the things that I was reading. Some of my preliminary research was turning up some pretty interesting stuff, and I could not believe that this was something that people weren't really talking about more. It seems like a really big deal. However, Opus Dei is very, very good at keeping everything that they do secret. They stay very quiet about their activities. They keep everything very close to their chest. And there's a really good chance, even if you were raised in a similar fashion to me, that you probably have never heard of them before. They had a brief spotlight shown on them around the time the movie The Da Vinci Code came out, because that movie painted them in some pretty dramatic strokes. And so they used that as an opportunity to kind of proselytize and get their name out there and everything. But after that, they've kind of faded away and have been pretty silent. But don't you fear, they are still there, they are still alive and well, and there is still plenty to talk about, and that is what we are going to be doing here. So with this video, I just want to give a overview of Opus Dei, what it is, where it was founded, who founded it, and some of the interesting pieces of information that I found during my preliminary research. I have a whole bunch of notes that I'm going to be going over because there is a lot of information. I want to make sure that I get everything correct. So as I'm looking down reading, try not to mind the fact that I'm not looking directly at the camera. I just want to make sure that everything I get is correct. All of my sources for this video will be down in the description below, so you can go and check those out for yourself at any time. So diving right in, what is Opus Dei? Opus Dei is an institution of the Catholic Church founded in 1928 by Jose Maria Escriva. We will be returning to him in a moment. It teaches that everyone is called to holiness and that ordinary life is a path to sanctity, which is pretty standard stuff. I mean, that's basically what it means to be a Catholic, so it's nothing crazy. Opus Dei is Latin for work of God. Hence, it is referred to by members as the work, which I'm not gonna lie, seems a little bit creepy to me, but that's just me. As of 2018, here are some numbers for you. There were 95,318 members, 93,203 laypersons, and 2,115 priests. However, this figure does not include the diocesan priests, so priests living in Rome, I think, who are members of Opus Dei's Priestly Society of the Holy Cross, estimated to number 2,000 members in 2005. So that's obviously not an up-to-date figure. There could be more, there could be less. 70% of the members live in their private homes, just leading ordinary Catholic lives with their families. 30% though are celibate, the majority of whom live in Opus Dei centers, and that is something, these centers, I'm going to be coming back to those at some point because they're very interesting. Opus Dei members organize training in Catholic spirituality applied to daily life, and they are involved in running universities, university residences, schools, publishing houses, hospitals, and technical and agricultural training centers. So if this doesn't give you a notion of how far-reaching this organization is, I don't know what will. Granted, there are not even 100,000 members as of 2018, and there are hundreds of thousands of Catholics around the world, yet this organization seems to have its fingers in a whole lot of pies, and all of these pies are involved in the education and formation of young adult people, and I think that's very interesting, and I think we need to remember that. So returning to Jose Maria Escriva, he was born January 9th, 1902 in the small town of Barbastro in Huesca, Aragon, Spain. He's quoted as saying he felt he had been chosen for something as a child, allegedly after seeing footprints left in the snow by a monk walking barefoot. I want to give him a hard time for this, I really do, but honestly I can't. I mean, I'm someone who looks for meaning and symbolism in my everyday life. I mean, who amongst us doesn't? I think it's kind of human nature, so as much as I want to roast him for that, I really can't. He became an ordained priest in March 28th, 1925, and after a retreat he claimed he saw Opus Dei, a way by which Catholics might learn to sanctify themselves by their secular work. And this is something I just want to take a pause real quick. It seems odd to me because, like I said, Opus Dei is supposed to teach that everyone is called to holiness and that ordinary life is a path to sanctity, blah, 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 all that stuff I just said. That's literally what it means to be Catholic. That's literally what you're doing as a Catholic. Why is it that we also need this organization that is doing the same thing? What is this organization offering that is just so elite and special that you can't do that as a Catholic just living your life? It seems redundant to me and unnecessary. Escriva's doing his thing, his Opus Dei thing, whatever. He fled Madrid during the Spanish Civil War to Burgos, the headquarters of General Francisco Franco's nationalist forces. And this is where the controversy starts to come in. So, first of all, he was alleged as having said some things in support of Hitler and his treatment of the Jews during the Holocaust. That has been debunked or not, depending on what source you look at. However, it is a fact that he was a big supporter of right-wing leaders, and he was a big fan of Franco, who, if you don't know, was a fascist, a real peach of a guy. There's also the fact that he requested a title of nobility, which is just kind of like, really, dude? Like, you think so highly of yourself that you think you should be a noble even though you're a priest and you're supposed to have taken all these vows of, you know, poverty, chastity, and obedience? Like, you want this title of a noble? Like, it just seems a little unnecessary. He twice requested to be appointed a bishop, and this is incredibly interesting to me. He was denied both times on the basis of church officials' concerns about the organization of Opus Dei, so they didn't like what they were seeing, and Escriva's psychological profile because he had a reputation for a nasty temper and a drinking problem. So that's very interesting to me, just because, you know, you have this individual who founded this organization, which for all intents and purposes must be doing pretty well. You know, he's got these lofty ambitions of leading people to heaven. Granted, I am not familiar with the requirements one would have to meet to be appointed a bishop, but it seems like he would be a pretty good candidate. And yet, even so, the 2 times that he requested it, church officials were like, no, absolutely not. And they also did not like what they were seeing with Opus Dei. It seems to me that that would have been a perfect opportunity to kind of chop the head off the snake, but they didn't do it, and so now here we are. And then it just seems like Escriva was not really a great dude. It seems like he really didn't get along with anybody. Nobody really seemed to like him. He was kind of just catty with everybody, and then of course there's the temper and the drinking and all that kind of thing. But the icing on the cake of this whole thing is that despite all of this, he was still canonized a saint in 1992 by then Pope John Paul II, and that was very controversial, obviously, given everything that we just said. And also because, I guess I have to explain a little bit, being canonized a saint is a big long process. You know, Rome will appoint a panel of people. It's kind of like a court proceeding. There's a big investigation into the person's life and whether or not they were the candidate. There have to even be like some miracles and everything contributed to them. It is not a quick and easy process, and yet a lot of people felt that it was rushed because he went through the entire process and was canonized in only a few months. And a lot of people felt that that was suspicious. I think that's suspicious, and I have some theories as to why that might be that we'll touch on at some point. So all the way up until present day, this organization has had plenty of controversy, plenty of problems. There are a couple of people here that I want to mention that I found throughout my research that are perfect examples of what I am talking about. The first is an individual named Robert Hansen. You may have actually heard of him prior to this. He was a very infamous member of Opus Dei who was convicted of treason in 2001 for selling secrets to the Soviet Union during his time as an FBI agent. And during my research, I actually found a Encyclopedia Britannica page all about him, and something that I thought was funny. You know, he was a really well-educated guy, and he was a devout Catholic. He was a member of the FBI. He was a member of Opus Dei. Like, he had all this stuff going for him, but he would really like to sell secrets on the side of the Soviet Union, you know, that kind of thing. It says that after his wife discovered his espionage, he confessed his activities to an Opus Dei priest, promised to stop spying, and donated money to a Catholic charity, which I just think, like, way to right your treasonous wrongs. Like, if there is one way way to show the United States that you are sorry for selling secrets to the enemy, it's to donate money to a Catholic charity, which is probably tax exempt. Like, good job. And it didn't even work anyway. That he was found out around 1979, 1980, and they told him to stop doing it, to cut it out, and he didn't. And then he was caught and convicted in 2001. So definitely did not make Opus Dei look real great, but you know, that's just the way the cookie crumbles. This other individual, even better, will be ending with him, is Reverend John C. McCloskey. And there's a chance you may have actually heard of him before, because he got famous for conversion prepping big name conservatives such as Newt Gingrich, Larry Kudlow, and Sam Brownback, among others. However, Opus Dei had to pay $977,000 settle a sexual misconduct suit by another woman associated with Opus Dei. Typical. And in the Washington Post article that I found talking about this whole situation, it said that the woman who filed the suit became worried when she came into contact with someone else who knew about McCloskey and heard that he may have been working as a priest in California, which is honestly just a tale as old as time when it comes to these Catholic scandals. I mean, how many times have we seen it happen where a priest was caught doing something he shouldn't have, touching a kid or whatever, and instead of prosecuting and sending the piece of shit to jail for the rest of his life, they just move him somewhere else so he can keep doing it to other people and nobody's the wiser, until, you know, 25 years later when the cat is finally let out of the bag and everyone's so shocked. Basically the exact same thing happened here. Hopefully he wasn't able to come into contact and harm anybody else. Opus Dei claimed that he was not in a position to do that, but how do we really know, honestly? This McCloskey person is interesting. I actually was contacted by someone on Reddit, and they have requested to remain anonymous for the sake of their family, and I will be respecting that, but I want to include this story because it's kind of an inside perspective on the whole thing, and I think it'd be an interesting way to wrap this up. So the title of this message was, "My uncle is an Opus Dei priest. He is also an awful human being." They say, "I come from a huge Irish Catholic family. My mom was one of 8, my dad was one of 6, and I'm one of 7. Despite having 6 blood uncles and over 27 male first cousins, there is only one priest in the family, my mom's oldest brother. He was a big shot Wall Street something or another, newly graduated from Columbia when the work, Opus Dei, got their hands on him. Naturally, he donated all of his substantial wealth that he was using to support secular charities. All reports point that he was a really good dude before his conversion. Because of his former wealth and influence, he shot up in the ranks in the American conservative Catholic realm, immediately became the chaplain at Princeton, and eventually became known as the great evangelizer of the wealthy. Among his long list of powerful converts, like I said, Newt Gingrich, so on and so forth. He was CNN's Catholic correspondent on EWTN on a weekly basis and had multiple specials on the life and works of Escriva, had a New York Times article written about him, which I read and was very cringy, wrote multiple successful books, was on the board of over 10 Catholic universities, and helped found the Newman Guide for Catholic Colleges, which is the arbiter for homeschool parents about which Catholic universities are Catholic enough. So basically it's like the litmus test. Catholic parents that want to send their kids to Catholic universities after homeschooling them are like, is this Catholic enough? You know, you get the idea. I was the only male cousin of my generation to take my faith seriously growing up. I was a total Jesus freak youth group kid, went to a Newman approved college, even spent a year doing mission work, and had a couple year stint as a parish youth minister. Because I was really the only nephew into my faith, I was the only one who he invested any kind of relationship in. All of my other cousins hated him, but I never understood why, because he was always kind and supportive to me. Turns out he was an asshole to everyone else. It wasn't until he refused to be at any family event in which my female cousin's female partner was attending. So on top of everything else, he's also homophobic, which is really nice. Now, I fully believed gay sex was a sin at the time, but even I saw how unchristian shunning family for religious differences was. It's not like they asked him to celebrate their wedding. Especially for the great evangelizer, shunning the gays seemed pretty counterproductive for spreading the gospel. I would have to agree. Okay, you might say, while a lot of that is pretty shitty, it seems like relatively normal conversion Catholic stuff, but that was the surface. As I started to become involved with the work in high school, something started to feel off. It seemed weird to me that all the lay people involved, or at least higher up in the ranks, seemed to have a lot of money. It seemed odd to me how much time, money, and energy lobbying against gay marriage, contraception, and the legalization of marijuana instead of doing actual charitable works was. I began to notice many of the women involved had eating disorders, and they talked a lot about submission. I decided it wasn't for me and ended up getting involved in the secular Franciscan order and took a promise of poverty. Once it became clear that I wasn't going to become an Opus Dei priest or rich, I suddenly stopped hearing from him. That is until the allegations started coming out. Turns out he had been molesting multiple adult women to whom he gave spiritual direction. One of the women came forward to one of the other priests at the reading house, so one of the Opus Dei centers, who thankfully took the allegation very seriously and reported it to the police before his superiors. That man was promptly defrocked from the work. So for doing the right thing and reporting this behavior, Opus Dei kicked him out. Opus Dei gave the woman over $1 million settlement and made her sign an NDA. Uncle Charles stepped out of the public light and the woman was told he was banned from any spiritual direction with women and was not allowed to be alone with a woman under any circumstance, but he was just reassigned and began ministry as usual, which is what I said. My family knew none of this until that woman and a few others went to the press after they found out Uncle Charles was still doing active ministry. At the age of 59, he was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's, which was only exacerbated by his raging alcoholism. What is it with these priests and their drinking problems? Could it be that they're trying to mask some issues? He now lives in one of their mansions with 2 full-time attendants, a cook, a full-service staff. I visited him once because I felt bad he was slowly losing his identity and life, and most of my family had disowned him. He surprisingly remembered me. He didn't even recognize my mom at that point, and like the past 10 years had never happened, he immediately began his pitch about why I should join Opus Dei. I told him I was no longer Catholic, and he told me to get out. And that's basically the end of the story, which I think is just really, really tragic and really sad, but I wanted to include it because this doesn't demonstrate what we're dealing with here and why I think it's important to talk about this organization, then I really don't know what will. I'm going to leave the video here for now. Stay tuned because I already am working on the outline for the next one. It's going to be really, really interesting. We're going to go into some of the personal accounts of people who are former members of Opus Dei. I'm really looking forward to that. I think it's going to be really worthwhile, so definitely stay tuned, subscribe, all that good stuff. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. If you have any knowledge or previous experience with the Opus Dei and you would be willing to reach out and tell me about it, I would appreciate it. I will of course keep you anonymous if you wish. I understand there's a lot of fear for people coming forward about this, and I want to be respectful of that if at all possible. Thank you so far for sticking it out this long, and hopefully I will have a new video out for you guys very soon, and I hope to see you there whenever and wherever that may be. Bye guys.